Hello, Sooner Nation, OU Insider subscribers, Coach Brian Clinton enthusiasts, people who had no doubt that Oklahoma could come into to Owen Field last weekend and thoroughly dominate Alabama. This isn't the podcast for you because we did not think that was going to happen, and we're going to talk about that and what it means for this program moving forward. This is another episode of the Oklahoma Drill, a podcast fueled by OU Insider and the Rivals Network. I'm Jesse Crittenden, and Brian, it's been 4 days since OU beat Alabama 24-3. I got to tell you, man, I don't know. I think I'm still processing it. I think I'm still trying to wrap my head around what happened and how it happened. How you doing, man? Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving. I'm in the same boat. I think where my brain is at is I have processed the fact that Oklahoma won the football game. I have not processed the fact in the manner in which Oklahoma won the football game is kind of like where I'm still stuck, I don't know. I mean, I've watched the game back a few times now, and it's just everything in game flow just went Oklahoma's direction, but it wasn't that they just got lucky. They just willed it to happen. So very, very interesting game. But yeah, man. Any Thanksgiving plans?
So Becca and I are going to Fort Gibson tomorrow to see some of her family. I went to Owasso on Sunday, so this was actually my side of the family. So my thing was, before you get bent out of shape,
I am genuinely hurt.
Before you get bent out of shape, I went to bed at 4 a.m. on Saturday writing about that game. Woke up at 8:30 to write more. Then we drove to Owasso, got there for lunch, spent some time there. And I was working before we left. I was working while we were in the car driving to get there. And then I was working on the way back. So, and I've heard that you are not a turkey guy. That's what I've heard. You hate turkey. You hate Thanksgiving food. And I was like, I'm not going to go see somebody who hates Thanksgiving food. You are a notorious Thanksgiving hater. That's what I've heard.
Nope.
Is that fake news?
That. Yeah, that's a fat lie.
What's your go-to? Okay, for 2 questions: ham or turkey?
Turkey.
Ooh, well, you're wrong.
Ham, it's respectable either way. I mean, if it helps, I am making a ham tomorrow, not a turkey. It does help.
Mm-hmm.
So, do with that what you will.
Thanksgiving side dish.
So this is a tricky question because homemade, like the homemade stuff, homemade stuffing, or like a green bean casserole that grandma's been making for 40 years, like those are really hard to top. I don't know, you can't really go wrong with like box stuffing. Like that's you can't really go wrong with that. So I would say that, or I don't know, it's not really a side dish, but my God, I look forward to a piece of pecan pie. Like
I love pecan pie
every year
with whipped cream, dude. It's my favorite dessert, of all time. Pecan pie.
I believe we talked about this last.
We did. Yeah, we did.
Our mutual love for pecan pie. That's really what galvanized this friendship.
It did. Is mac and cheese a Thanksgiving side dish? Not traditionally.
Not traditional. Like if you just throw together some mac and cheese, no. But if like you bake the top of it or something, like make it extra, like you get a little extra on there. I would say, yeah. There's like baked mac and cheese, really good. Like the little breadcrumbs that you sprinkle on top, and yeah, like that. That's a mac and cheese dish. But if you just throw some Kraft in the pot and boil it, I don't know. I mean, I do that for my kids, so I don't really think that's all that special.
I do that for me. I love mac and cheese. I'm not throwing shade to anybody that's just putting some Kraft mac and cheese in a pot.
I'm just in the terms of, is it a Thanksgiving dish? Uh,
It should be if it's not.
What's the most overrated Thanksgiving dish?
Turkey or I'm not a big stuffing guy. I'm not. I'd like to be. Green bean casserole has grown on me as I've gotten older. Stuffing. It's just like stuffing. You know the best way I can describe stuffing? It's fine. It's fine.
It's like mashed potatoes. It's there, but it's not what. Yeah, like
Wrong. No, now you're wrong. Because mashed potatoes are fantastic with some gravy. Fantastic.
My thing with mashed potatoes is if you were left with an impression that the mashed potatoes were really good, then the rest of your meal must have been bad because they're literally just mashed potatoes. But I hope I'm really going to upset somebody with the most overrated, um, the most overrated side is sweet potato casserole, and the most overrated dessert is pumpkin pie.
Okay. Pumpkin pie is good once. One time a year. If you eat it one time. If you eat it more than that, then I honestly think it gets worse the more you eat it. That's
Fair.
what I would say about pumpkin pie.
Fair.
But I like pumpkin pie.
There.
So you're wrong. All these takes you're throwing out are wrong. They're just
all right. Football.
They're wrong. Brian, okay. I think what stood out to me most about the Bama game, and look, everybody that's listening to this has already watched it and probably celebrated. And if you were at the stadium, you were probably one of the thousands of people who were on the field to celebrate it. Which was that your first field rush to be on the field for one?
In Norman, obviously, yes.
Yeah.
No, I was on the field for Bedlam last year.
Oh, yeah.
Which was,
yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
In hindsight, it's they're interesting. They're really interesting. You don't realize just how hectic it is until you're in the middle of one.
Right.
But
well, I think the thing that stood out to me, Brian, was it wasn't just the way they ran the football. It wasn't just Jackson Arnold and Xavier Robinson. I mean, just carving up Alabama's defense. It wasn't just OU's offensive line holding up pretty damn well against Bama. I think it was that we finally saw this offense have an identity. It took 11 games, but OU has found an identity on offense, and they did it without their top 5 receivers. They did it missing 3 starting offensive linemen, and they did it with a quarterback who was benched earlier in the year, and they did it with a running back who was 6th on the depth chart coming into the season, and they did it with an interim play caller.
Yep.
And still took it to Bama. And we had seen them run the ball more, a little bit better over the last couple of weeks. And Brent Venables kind of talked about that they had struggled to run the ball. But Brian, I don't think there's any universe that would have prepared me for all of those ingredients still coming together to make it to where you could throw it 11 times in a football game and they weren't all true passes. A couple of them were shovels.
Mm-hmm.
And finished with 68 passing yards and completely controlled the tempo and the pace of play against Bama. A Bama team that needed to win, by the way.
Right. Yeah.
That
wasn't like one of those letdown spots. Everything was still on the line for this team. For Alabama.
It was. And I don't know, man. This has got me thinking about what's for one, we were talking about it before we started recording. We have said it all year. How crazy, how different can the vibes be around a program from week to week? I mean, last week we're talking about OU staring 5-7 in the face.
Mm-hmm.
Now, all of a sudden, despite this team, they're still 6-5, but there's incredible optimism around this team now.
Right.
And now you're looking at 8-5. And I got to tell you, Brian, 8-5 would have been not horrible regardless of how this year went. 8-5 would have been fine. But in the context of everything that's happened this year, 8-5, I think you're going into the offseason with some feeling pretty dang good about
Oh
where
my
this thing's
gosh,
at right
yeah.
now.
Oh my goodness. I mean, on the offensive side of the ball, things could not have gone worse this year. Things could not, like, over the course of the season. This is all the factors, everything that went wrong for Oklahoma this year on the offensive side of the ball alone. I can't remember a season where Oklahoma had that many things happen to them on one side of the ball, as long as I've been a fan or a member of the bit. Going back to just being a fan growing up, I can't remember top five, now six wide receivers out. Offensive line being a complete rotating door. Offensive coordinator gets fired. I mean, you're losing. Not to mention the offensive linemen that you have don't bring a whole lot of experience back from last year because you just lost three of your top five starters from like everything that Oklahoma had to overcome on the offense side of the ball. Just wild,
Yeah.
absolutely wild.
Yeah. And Brian, it's made me think about what is this win? What does it mean for this program moving forward? For one, Brian, I think we've got to give a ton of credit to Jackson Arnold.
Mm,
A
yeah,
guy that look has gotten criticism and deserved a lot of it this year. The one game is not going to wipe away the struggles that he's had this year.
sure.
His benching was warranted against Tennessee, and if he doesn't cough up the ball late against Missouri, they probably win that game. Those are real tangible things. Having said that, to mentally come back from that Missouri game to not only lead this offense in a really impressive performance, but he carried the ball 25 times.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of those were either called runs or obviously plays where he has the option to run it. And he ran the ball like hell, man. I mean, he went at Bama.
Yep.
And that Missouri game was bad enough that his benching wouldn't have been unjustified, and for him to have fallen to an unrecoverable place in terms of this season and coming back from it wouldn't have
Mm-hmm.
been out of the question.
Yeah.
I got to give credit to Jackson Arnold, man. That was a heck of a
Yeah.
performance on Saturday.
Yeah. And it's huge considering, all those factors and the fact that it came against an Alabama team that has, I mean, there's no lack of talent on that roster. Like that is one of the two most talented rosters in football. Um, Maybe three. I mean, if you want to throw Texas and Georgia ahead of them, I probably wouldn't give you too much grief about that. But there's not really anybody else up there that could say that they have had a pick of the best athletes out there. And Arnold just, one, he looked like he belonged, but two, it was just really impressive for him to have the kind of performance that he did, given all of the pressure that was already on him. Like, I don't know. The way that the team around him played, I think obviously had a big factor in that. I am kind of wondering if him being at home and it being senior night, like how much that actually um, really helped this team. But at the end of the day, his offensive line played its best game, and I think the long term thing that really plays out for me on top of what you just had to say about Arnold is there should not be another word. There should not be another phrase uttered about Bill Bedenbaugh going anywhere.
You're getting ahead of me. You're getting ahead of me, Brian.
Like that's the one thing. I don't mean to, like, I hope I don't want to steal your thunder, so
You're
we can
fine.
wait. But
Go off.
my goodness, um, the way that I think the way that it's best to view this offense truly is in two seasons. You have the regime under Seth Luttrell, and how things looked, and then Joe John Finley. What the performance against Alabama showed me. So that was game 4, right? Of Joe John Finley being the play caller. That also means you've had 1 month of practice being run by Joe John Finley on the offensive side of the ball. That means you have 5 weeks with the bye week included, right before the Bama game. To me, what that says is for 5 weeks now, the guys have been on the same page. And really what it came down to was execution. But those 5 weeks, I mean, we've heard it multiple times throughout the course of those last 5 weeks, that back to the basics, the fundamentals, really focusing on the fundamentals. And that this team had put together several good practices, some of their best practices of the year in recent weeks. To me, that says the leadership on this team is stronger than we thought it was. To me, that says that the group of coaches that we have in place in Norman is stronger than we thought it was. And particularly along the offensive line, that group has a higher ceiling than people thought it was. What it showed me is Logan Howland, Heath Ozida, for all the lumps that they've taken, those guys are improving at a massive level, at a very quick rate. If that's your starting left side next year and you get Jacob Sexton back on the right side, Everett's back, Fabechi Mwiwu's back, you throw in a Michael Fasusi and a Foje and like
Jake Taylor,
Eddie Pierre-Louis got another year of the group. I mean, it was one game, and people always say don't make your assumptions off of one game performance. I am doing that because it was Alabama. The talent level of the guys that they just played, like, it was very, very impressive how much more physical they were than Alabama on both sides of the ball. But the way that they pushed Alabama around in the trenches was very impressive to me. And that I already knew. I mean, I'm a Bill beating Bill apologist. Like, everybody knows that I don't believe I believe Oklahoma football is in a worse place the day that Bill Bedenbaugh leaves. Whether that be retire, whenever that happens. To me, this was just another reason why that's a guy that you have to keep around. Like, you just have to. That's you don't see that kind of marked improvement over the course of a season in a lot of places, and that's one of the reasons why he is such a special offensive line coach.
I think the thing that's hard for me is because it is just one game, and oh, good Lord, this offense has been really bad for stretches this year, and I have said some pretty incredibly harsh things about this offense, and I stand by a lot of what I've said. But I also think more than anything, I think you just needed to see that there were pieces you could build around, that there was reason for confidence, that there was reason for hope moving forward. And you've gotten that because you're right. Look, the offensive line gave up 41 sacks through the Ole Miss game. It's unacceptable.
Yep.
It is. It's unacceptable. Absolutely. But there had been real improvement even going into the Bama game. And it's crazy now after the Bama game, you can look and say, man, Logan Howland and Heath Ozida, if that's your left side, bring back Troy Everett. If you can move Jacob Sexton to the right side of the line and then keep him at one spot. Stop moving him back and forth.
Yep.
Put him at one spot. And then you've got they're only expecting to lose Branson Hickman, Michael Tarquin, and
Spencer Brown.
And this isn't to say all these guys are amazing, because Fabechi Wiwu's had his struggles, and right, that's a given. But now you can bring back Fabechi and Jake Taylor and Jacob Sexton and Eddie Pierre-Louis and Isaiah Autry-Dent And if you can keep Michael Fasusi, now all of a sudden, yeah, it's a lot. We saw a lot of the improvement in one game, but I think now all of a sudden you can feel some optimism about that. Here's the other thing though, Brian, is if you're Brent Venables, how do you find that balance between seeing the positives that are there, seeing the improvement that is there, or that was shown against Bama? That was a huge win. But also, how do you take it within the scope of the entire season? The struggles, the injuries, not to mention you've still got an offensive coordinator search. You've still got a new guy to bring in.
Yeah.
That's like, to me, this game is so, because OU's had bad seasons before, right? In the 90s, in 2022, none of those teams had a win like they did on Saturday.
Right.
And so I think it's easy to, like, I think if you want to say it's just one game, that's not wrong. And if you want to say, but they beat the hell out of Bama, ran the ball down their throat with a true freshman running back and a patchwork offensive line with young guys on it. I just like, I think that's the hard thing for me is, do you still have to push forward with any changes or any things you were like, because I'm wondering too, now when you go to the portal, do you feel better about what you've got bringing back? Or do you still, on the offensive line, or do you still feel the need to go get some veterans? Do you still feel the need to go get a new quarterback? You know, I don't know.
Yeah. No, that's an excellent question. You know, I think it makes you realize that the situation wasn't necessarily as dire as you thought it was, but you still have like the common denominator in all of this is youth. Like that's the common denominator in all of these guys that have been quote unquote problematic on the offensive side of the ball. There's been injuries obviously at the wide receiver position, but again, the reason why you don't have a whole lot of production there right now, the guys that have been there and had to start have not been around very long. I expect Zion Kearney to have a good collegiate career. I do. I think he's going to be a great wide receiver. He's just, it's not easy to just come right in, let alone in the SEC as a freshman and just immediately take off and start playing against the defenses that they've played against. Like, let's not just put that on the back burner. The Texas, Tennessee, Ole Miss, Alabama, like these South Carolina, these are top 10 nationally ranked units in defense. And
it's true.
Yeah, and you're playing, and those guys that you're playing against, outside of the Dylan Stewarts that are just a freak, from South Carolina, you're playing against experienced guys that have been doing it for a while. And so, I think what you kind of look at is, okay, this is improvement. This is something that we can build on. But I think that's where it's important for the staff to look at this. And the way that Brent Venables talks about it in his press conferences is you can almost get the sense that he is breaking it into two different seasons in his mind, because he brings up the last 4 games since our staff changed. We've ran the ball much better. He's going through breaking it into two different things. And so I think it's important to look at it from that perspective and still realize if there's a guy out there that you feel can make you better, you go out and get him. I don't think it's going to. The thing that I would caution is that yes, you were hearing they're going to have to go get an offensive line. They're going to have to go get some offensive linemen between now and next year. But I think the general fan might look at that and think they need to go get one at every position. Like your new starting 5 is going to be completely different than it was this last year. You can supplement things. Adding 1 or 2 guys to that rotation is a huge deal. And so I still think there is a need for that. The Jackson Arnold question, or the quarterback question is the one that I'm having a tough time with.
So, and I'm glad you brought up Jackson Arnold. To add to your point, supplemental, I think, is the right word. Now, let's say all of this to say, if they go to LSU and get blown out, things are going to feel different again.
Sure.
And then if they go into a bowl game like a not particularly esteemed bowl game, and get beat, and they finish 6-7, you're going to lose some of that momentum that you got from Bama.
Sure.
But if you win this weekend and either put up a really good fight in the bowl game or win it and finish 8-5, I do think supplemental is the right word. I think at that point you can point to, well, there were a ton of injuries, and as Brent Venables said yesterday, shockingly, I made a mistake with the Seth Luttrell hire. And you know what? He did. That's the reality. He did. I think it's a big deal that he admitted it. And Brian,
Yeah.
I think Saturday was the opportunity he needed to come out and be able to say that, because he could point to that Bama game and say, I did make a mistake, because look what we just did.
Right.
And so, yeah, I think now you can approach, if you take this momentum and end strong, I do think you can go into the portal and say, what's going to bolster the roster, not how do we remake the roster. And that is a very important distinction.
Yep.
As far as the Jackson Arnold question, I don't know. I don't know. Somebody on the board said, because I asked for hot takes and questions this week, and somebody said Arnold returns and sits behind whatever quarterback we get in the portal. I can tell you one thing. No.
I don't think so.
Jackson Arnold's not coming back to be a backup. Like, he's just not. You can throw that out immediately.
Yeah.
So I think, I don't know, because I think you could, I think regardless, Saturday was impressive enough, and the talent is clearly there. I think it's clear you can build an offense around him. Now, I think it's clear you can't just throw whoever you want at OC and not hire a quarterbacks coach.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's clear that you can build something around him. Now, that's not to suggest you're going to run him 25 times every Saturday. But I think if you want to make the argument that Jackson Arnold should come back, and regardless of who they hire, and if they want to bring somebody, that Arnold should have a fair shot at being the starting quarterback next year, I think you can make that argument. I do.
Yeah.
Saturday was really impressive. He also has been really bad this year at times. I'm not going to offer, I don't have any intel other than to say it's just one game, but I don't know how you don't look at Jackson Arnold differently, at least a little bit, than maybe we had going into the game.
Yeah.
I don't know. Because there's still going to be a sense of urgency to play better next year. Even if OU still finishes 8-5, you still can't go through the lows this year like you did this year, next year. You still can't do that.
Right.
There's still going to be urgency. Right. I don't know.
So the thing with Jackson, like, if I ask this question, the knee-jerk reaction, I'm curious, how many interceptions, and you're going to know this, how many interceptions has Jackson Arnold thrown this year? Most people's thought would be like, oh, that's got to be like 7 or 8, at least 3. He's thrown 3. He's thrown the same amount of interceptions this year as he did in the bowl game last year.
Yeah.
The fumbles is another thing. Like, that's an entirely different issue on its own. Like, have to get that fixed. You cannot put the ball on the ground. I honestly feel like this entire offense, the way that you have to look at them is just so tough. It's so tough to really draw any conclusions, like true, real conclusions on who's good and who's not, because of how much the personnel has changed. Like, it's just been, it has not, like, we see it with the offensive line. Like, we see continuity with the offensive line now. It's like the third week in a row that they've had pretty much the same starting group out there, and they have played really good ball. They played winning football against Missouri. I mean, the offensive line's getting better, and it's because there's some continuity. So, to me, it just really, I don't know what's going to happen with Arnold. I think if Oklahoma goes out and gets a portal quarterback, to me, he's gone. Like, I think that's kind of, you're not going to bring somebody else in from the portal and keep Jackson Arnold. I just don't think you are. He's a 5-star guy, top 10 recruit in the country in his class, and I just don't think you're going to be able to do that. It would be really tough.
Regardless of the struggles, there are 100 FBS schools that would love to have Jackson Arnold as their starting quarterback.
Yep.
So I mean, I don't know. Here's the reality, though. Yes, it's within the context of one game. One game does not define this season. One game shouldn't mean every opinion that said before the game is now irrelevant. That's not the case. Mm-hmm. It was such an impressive win, such a much needed win. I do think it changes the trajectory of the program a little bit. I think it saved Brent Venables' job. Yep. Not that he was going to get fired this year, but right. I think it saved his job, assuming they can keep building from this game. Yeah. I think it's possible it has maybe saved some of the offensive assistants' jobs too, depending on the way this season ends. I think it makes you look at Jackson Arnold differently, and I think it makes you look at the offensive line differently. It's crazy what 1 week can do, man. And I got to tell you this. Now you can look at that backfield and say, you've got a guy in Xavier Robinson.
Man.
I asked Brent about him. I asked Brent Venables about him on Tuesday. Compared him to Quentin Griffin, which the 5-year-old in me got a kick out of that because I grew up watching Quentin Griffin.
Yeah.
And then even made the joke, and he said he was joking, but he was joking, but he made the joke of, hey, I was asking the same questions. Why wasn't he on the field earlier?
Right.
He said DeMarco Murray finally came to his senses.
Yeah.
Which
smartened up.
Brent was in a jokey mood yesterday. Turns out beating Bama will lighten the mood a little bit.
Yeah.
Xavier Robinson, dude, holy hell. I don't think we can talk enough about how impressive he's been the last 3 weeks.
No.
Out of nowhere. And people asking why didn't he get on the field earlier, the reality is he struggled when he got here.
Yep.
Struggled.
And your typical freshman struggle.
Yes.
A lot of it too. Yes.
But weight wasn't where it needed to be. He even talked about on Monday, getting the playbook down was hard. And Brent Venables mentioned it yesterday. Guys like Eli Bowen and Jaden Jackson who can come in immediately as freshmen and play heavy snaps and contribute, that's not the norm.
Nope.
It's rare. But I'll tell you this, people I talk to, Brian, about Xavier Robinson, nobody on the team works harder than that guy does.
Every day.
Joe John Finley, when I asked about him on Saturday, said that guy essentially every day since he arrived in the spring has been up here at 6 a.m. getting extra reps with Jerry Schmidt. It's paying off, dude. I mean, Xavier Robinson went from it'd be cool if he was kind of a contributor in 2026, right? To, oh man, he might be able to help the team this year, to, should that be the lead running back next year? That's how in the span of a couple of weeks, that's what's happened.
Think about it this way. He has overshadowed Taylor Tatum. Like, he's cast a shadow on Taylor Tatum, who was the 5-star guy coming into the season.
Tatum got benched,
right,
for Xavier Robinson.
Yep. That's it. I'll be completely 100% transparent with you. If Javonte Barnes was to come back at 100% this week, I still think Xavier Robinson is RB1. Like, I mean, I know what Javonte Barnes is to that room, and he should get some touches. But I think Robinson has proven that he deserves he deserves that lead back role right now until otherwise, because he's doing all the things that you would like a running back to do, but he's doing them at a level that really precedes him as far as his experience. He's holding on to the football well. He shows great instincts. He is extremely difficult to tackle. His center of gravity is awesome. So he has great balance. I mean, yeah, he is really, really tough to tackle, and he always falls forward. Like, he always falls forward for an extra yard or two.
I tweeted this earlier. I don't know if you saw it. You know how many yards after contact he's averaging this year?
Mm-mm.
4.55. That is 16th in the country among running backs who have gotten at least 30 carries. 4.55. 150 of his 192 yards this year are after contact. 150. That means he's routinely getting hit within a yard and a half of the line of scrimmage, and he's still picking up 4.5 more.
And that is why he is having the success that he is. Like, behind this offensive line, that's the prerequisite, right? Like, you're able to do this behind an offensive line that has struggled, and then obviously whenever the offensive line puts together a good game like they did last week, you see it hit big. He is exactly the kind of running back that Oklahoma needs right now, because if you could run through trash, which he does exceptionally, there's space. There is space there.
Oh, this is the last thing I'll say, Brian, before we talk about LSU this weekend, which now all of a sudden I feel pretty excited to go down to Baton Rouge. This is what I'll say, Brian. It wasn't just that OU won the game. It's how they did it. And if there were any people who were still believers in Brent Venables, that's the game you point to, because that game had Brent Venables' fingerprints all over it. That's how Brent Venables, and again, I don't think it's that he wants to run the ball 50 times and never throw it. I don't even mean that. I just think it was when Brent Venables came to Oklahoma, that was the vision. A dominant defense, a defense that can win you games, provided that the offense does enough to complement it. And that's what we saw. And I think I think that's why it was particularly important for Brent Venables and why it might save his job, because it wasn't just that they won when they needed it. It's because that was a Brent Venables win. That was a Brent Venables type of win.
Yep.
I think that's the best way I can put it.
That encapsulates pretty much the same takeaway I had just immediately after the game. I sat in here at 3:00 in the morning and podcasted after that game, after getting home. And this team at this point, the Oklahoma Sooners are Brent Venables' football team, but it's not just in title, right? Like, it's not just in with him being the head coach. This is a tough football team. They're resilient. They're intense. They pay attention to the details, like the detail oriented way with which they played. Like, only having 4 penalties in a game, like, for this team with as much youth as out there constantly on both sides of the football, like, that's paying attention to the details. Those are the things that people point to and say that's why Brent Venables is going to be a good head coach. If they can continue to gravitate towards those things, I think you will find more success. And that is the kind of, if you win games 24-3, and you do it by smashing the other team in the mouth, that's exactly what people expected whenever Brent Venables was hired. And perfect encapsulation of what his teams would look like going forward.
Let's talk about LSU, Brian.
Let's do it.
But before we do that, got to tell you about our sponsor today. It's Prize Picks. Prize Picks, it's the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. All you got to do, you just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. You can run your game all season long on Prize Picks. You can win up to 100 times your money with as little as 4 correct picks. It's the best way to get action on sports in over 30 states, including California, Florida, Georgia, and Texas. It's the only real money daily fantasy platform with an injury insurance policy so that your lineups stay and keep your lineups alive. It's the best place to get real money sports action. Join over 10 million users and sign up every day. Brian, I got to tell you, this week on Prize Picks, looking at a couple options. Jamar Chase, his line for this weekend, 79.5 receiving yards. Patrick Mahomes at more than 1.5 passing touchdowns. All you got to do is pick more or less. Jamar Chase has been my fantasy football savior this year in a couple different leagues. I think I'm going to bet for him to get even more than 79.5 receiving yards this year or this weekend. Patrick Mahomes? I don't know. We'll see. But I can tell you this, download the app today, use code OU Insider to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That is code OU Insider to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. Brian, everything we just said about OU could fall away if they lose this weekend in Baton Rouge. OU is still they opened as a touchdown underdog. I don't know if that's still the line. Do you know if that's still the line?
Let me look here real quick.
They're still an underdog. They are still expected to lose this weekend. But as I started digging through this matchup, Brian, and 5.5 point underdog, I gotta tell you, once I started going through the numbers and started watching LSU a little bit more, I'm really intrigued by this game because this is not the Alabama game. This is a different matchup. LSU has different weaknesses and different ways they can attack Oklahoma. I gotta tell you though, I feel pretty good from an Oklahoma perspective. There's a couple of reasons why. I don't think any of us saw Oklahoma smashing Alabama in the mouth on the ground like that.
Mm-hmm.
They should be able to do that against this LSU team, man. LSU's 60th in the country in rushing yards allowed. You mentioned before we started, they're 15th out of 16 teams in the SEC in defending the run. The game plan for Oklahoma is literally what it was last week. It's limit explosive plays on defense and run the ball and control the clock on offense. I think they can do that, man.
Yeah.
That's how I'm seeing this weekend. What are you seeing?
Yeah, I think the plan, if you can replicate exactly what you did offensively against LSU, I think you're going to be in a good spot. I think what it really plays into Oklahoma's favor is if you had to pick one in a game like this, whether you have success running the ball or passing the football, you want to be able to run the football because you can control the clock. Like being able to run the football at will and control the clock is a proven, long-standing way of winning football games. It has been done for years and years and years. I mean, if we're being completely honest with ourselves, last week Oklahoma looked very much like a wishbone or option team on offense, and they took it to Alabama. You knew it was coming, and it didn't matter. That's exactly. And if Oklahoma can do that, I think that they have a really good shot at winning this game on the road. I think the thing that makes you nervous on the flip side of that is with LSU's defense being susceptible to the run, the explosive passes is the one thing on the flip side that Oklahoma is a little bit susceptible to, and LSU is good at. So I think it's an interesting matchup, man. And you said it before the game or before the podcast started. If these teams played 10 times, I think each team would win 5 games. You said I think each team would win 5 of those matchups, and that's really what it feels like. This and for us to even be saying that after what we witnessed through that stretch ending with Missouri, you got to feel pretty good about things.
I agree. And we probably didn't give enough flowers to OU's defense against Bama. That performance was
incredible.
Stunning. To not only limit Jalen Milroe on the ground, I mean, 15 carries for 7 yards, but they had Jalen Milroe in hell. I mean, he was flustered and uncomfortable the entire game.
Yeah.
OU's front seven was amazing. Eli Bowen was fantastic against Ryan Williams. They're going to need that type of performance again against LSU. Now, is it realistic to hold LSU to 3 points? No, it's not. This LSU offense is different. It's not the same Bama. It's not the same offense as Bama. And you mentioned it, the explosive passing game. They're 10th in plays of 20 yards or passing plays of 20 yards or more with 49. I believe they're top 10 in the country in passing yards per game. I think they're 7th in passing yards per game. And Garrett Nussmeier is the ultimate swinging pendulum. If you catch him on the right day, he looks like the best quarterback in the country.
Yeah.
If you catch him on his bad days, he looks like he shouldn't be at a Power 4 school. Turnovers, mistakes, bad throws. Here's the thing, though. He's not afraid to throw it. He's not, that guy's got to be so open before I throw it. No, he's chucking it. And I think that is a little bit of it. Like, yeah, is it prone to more mistakes? Sure. Does it also ironically put more pressure on you as a defense? Yeah, it does. Because Alabama wanted to run Jalen Milroe last week. That's what their offense was. This week and how it's been all year is LSU is going to want to throw the ball early and often.
Yeah.
And I do think that is a little bit of a different challenge for Oklahoma, who, as much as Eli Bowen has been a revelation this year, and as much as OU's got some good pieces in the secondary, if they've been vulnerable to anything, it's giving up explosive passing plays. LSU can exploit that. And I think the worry, if you're Oklahoma, is, last week we shut down Jalen Milroe's rushing game. That forced their offense all out of whack. And then our offense was having so much success running the ball that we dominated the game. There wasn't really pressure on OU's offense to keep up. OU's defense was finally able to play with a lead. This weekend, I think your worry is if LSU connects on a couple of big plays down the field, if OU's offense not only feels pressure to stay in it, but to keep up, I think that's where you have concern that things could fall apart.
Yeah. Well, I look at this game, start looking at some of the statistical breakdowns, and you've already got a scouting report up on OU Insider, which is awesome. Make sure you're going and checking that out. But if you look at this game statistically, I think really what I've tried to do with Oklahoma is let's look at how this team has played in the last month. Like, what have things looked like in the last month? Because you have obviously there's been changes on the offensive side of the ball, but you have a good feeling around the teams that they've played over the last month. It's been a little more competitive than maybe the South Carolina or the Texas game was. And when you look at what Oklahoma has done, they rank second in the month of November in the Big 12, in the SEC in passing defense. They're only allowing 150 yards passing per game. On the flip side, in rushing offense, this one really blew me away. Oklahoma leads the SEC by a wide margin in rushing offense in the month of November. 253 yards a game, 5.51 a carry. South Carolina is second with 218. So it's almost a 40-yard difference. Oklahoma really, they're running the ball really well. Meanwhile, LSU is in the last month they ranked 14th in the SEC in rush defense, 182 yards a game over the last month. And so when you look at that, really to me what it feels like, which is just crazy, the OU offense you saw improvements against Ole Miss. You kind of have to throw the main game kind of out, but kind of not, because there was obviously improvements there. There was offensive improvements, at least from a running the football perspective against Missouri, and then things really took off against Alabama. It feels like Oklahoma's offense is kind of moving upward. LSU's offense has been trending in the opposite direction as of late. They did end up winning against Vanderbilt this last weekend. I think it was 24-17 was the final, but they just have not looked the same since that Texas A&M game. And so really, honestly, the feeling is it's almost as if two teams are headed in the opposite direction right now. Now, it is in Death Valley. there is so much value in that. Like we heard Brent Venables talk about it. He's got a wide circle of people that he can talk to, and they've all said that Death Valley at night in Baton Rouge is up there with the hardest venues in the world to play. I mean, it just is. Um, so there is some value to that. I think that's where the 5.5 is in the line. But I'm really curious, Jesse, and I want your thoughts on this too. I am really curious what the vibes in Baton Rouge are when Oklahoma gets there on Saturday night, because after the fire Brian Kelly chants started in the last week, um, several LSU folks that have broken down some of the games, they're saying the vibes aren't great right now. Like there's just a lot of turmoil. Could that play a role in this game? Is this one of those games where Oklahoma comes out and they put together a 4 or 5 minute drive from their first time touching the football and score? Does that just suck all the air out of the stadium? It's a very interesting matchup because there are so many little intricacies that could play a major factor in how the game looks.
It's a really good point. I think LSU is an interesting team to analyze this year because they're not really alone in terms of they're certainly disappointed by the way this season has gone, right? I mean,
Sure.
You're coming into the year. I think not only as a dark horse SEC title contender, but a dark horse contender to maybe make the playoff, and they're not going to do either of those things. And I think the fact that now Florida is playing better, sure, over the last couple of weeks they're playing better.
Yep.
That was a disappointing loss to get blown out against Bama in a game where LSU didn't look like they deserved to be on the same field as Bama.
Which is crazy.
Yeah. I think that's disappointing. I think the Texas A&M game was disappointing because that's a game LSU probably should have won. And so now I think, and yeah, now the USC loss also looks really bad in hindsight. I do wonder because I think both these teams, is Oklahoma under pressure to win this game? Sure, because finishing 7-5, that would feel awesome. But at the same time, I think now there's positive momentum coming into this game, right? Because they're already bowl eligible. They just beat the hell out of Bama, and now I think you can come into this if you're Oklahoma thinking, why can't we compete with these guys? We just blew out Bama. And I think if you're LSU, who had those expectations, and I do think there's buzz about Brian Kelly, I do wonder if the vibe is nervous, and I do wonder if OU comes down and does what they did against Bama and just runs it for 5, 6, 7 yards a carry. I do wonder. I really think I think LSU has more to lose this game than Oklahoma does. I think that's the best way to put it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I got to tell you, I'm really excited to go. I'm honestly really, really excited.
I am too. And I was not, we had this discussion off air. Whenever I remember the group chat, whenever we got the notification that we were good to go, I was like, do we have to? Oh, you muted. You're muted.
Should we say we're sick?
Yeah, right. It's just like, it had been so hard to follow this team all over the Southeast and watch the same outcome. But there's genuine reason for optimism. And it's at the end of the day, it's Death Valley. Like, yeah, I cannot wait. The fact, if I was Oklahoma, do I wish the game was played at 11 o'clock just in terms of being able to get in and out of there? And it be not nearly as hostile, probably an easier environment to play in. Sure. But as somebody covering the game and like wanting to know what it feels like to be in Death Valley at night, I am stoked about being on that field. Yeah, man, it's going to be fun. It's crazy how much things have changed over the last week or so, just with perspective. So it's going to be fun. And I honestly, to me, it feels like, just like you said, LSU has more to lose in this game. And And it feels like Oklahoma has a bigger opportunity in this game.
I agree. I think that's the best way to put it is I think for LSU finishing 7-5 would be pretty damn disappointing.
Yep.
And I'm not saying that Oklahoma finishing 7-5 is ever okay. I'm not saying it's ever acceptable.
Given context.
Given context, I think OU fans to finish the year 7-5 and possibly 8-5, if you can get a bowl win, I mean, that is a 180 turn from where this thing felt like it was a week ago.
Yep.
8-5, 7-5, 8-5 is something you can take into the offseason with momentum. 5-7 is not.
Right.
So I think, yeah, like you could say, like the LSU atmosphere, even if it is nervous, it's still going to be hostile as hell, and it's not going to be easy for Oklahoma to come in and win. But I do think finishing 7-5, like both these programs have a chance to finish 7-5, and I think it would mean monumentally more to one program than it would to the other.
Absolutely.
Brian, we're going to be there. We are enjoying Thanksgiving with our loved ones on Thursday. And then we are heading to Baton Rouge on Friday morning. So we're driving through Dallas to pick up our colleagues, Parker and Brandon, excuse me. Then we are all journeying from Dallas to Baton Rouge to go bring coverage of this game to our subscribers over at OUinsider.com. If you are not a subscriber, there's never a better time. And I say that every week because there is never a better time to do it than right now. You can also always like and subscribe here to this YouTube channel. Plenty of stuff you won't get here that you'll get over at OUinsider.com, but also still plenty of good stuff here. We have content daily about all things OU football and OU athletics. Never better time to sign up. This weekend, OU, 6 o'clock on ESPN against LSU. Get all your coverage over at OUinsider.com. Happy Thanksgiving to everybody. Hope it is a good holiday for each and every one of you. Thank you for following along as always, and we will see you next week on the Oklahoma Drill.